My name is Matthew Pallamary, author of Land Without Evil. There are many reasons for the demise of the Maya civilization, which had flourished for 3,000 years. The ruins of Palenque in Chiapas and Uxmal in Yucatan represent the height of one of the most developed cultures the Earth has ever seen. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and linguists have struggled with the question of how a civilization with such an extensive knowledge of math, science, and astronomy could become extinct. One popular belief, supported by much circumstantial evidence, is that the Maya outstripped their resources. Their extinction, coupled with the fact that the conquering Christians destroyed practically every record they could find, have contributed to the enigma. Further adding to these losses is the fact that the most developed religious, mystical, and intellectual knowledge of their culture was only known by a small select group of shaman kings and priests. Today we repeat the same mistakes on a global scale, destroying information and resources that could hold the keys to our survival into the future. The keepers of this knowledge are the disappearing shamans of today, who preserve timeless ecological wisdom while embodying a lifestyle that puts them in harmony with nature. Aside from being priests and performing artists, shamans were the first medical specialists in indigenous communities who used traditional methods that have been effective in treating both physical and psychological ailments. Shamans play a crucial role in helping scientists discover the potentials of plants. As one scientist has said, each time a medicine man dies, it's as if a whole library has been burned down. The chemical components of plants they use in healing rites could be building blocks for new drugs or cures for such diseases as cancer or AIDS. Brazilian Indian areas cover 11% of the national territory, encompassing practically every kind of Brazilian ecosystem, yet no value has been given for their ethnobotanical knowledge. This makes no sense when you consider how the abundant botanical resources of tropical rainforests have provided tangible medical advances, yet only 1% of the known plant and animal species have been thoroughly examined for their medicinal potentials. 70% of the 3,000 plants identified by the United States National Cancer Institute as having potential anti-cancer properties are endemic to the rainforest. Besides the intrinsic value of biodiversity, the human species are a part of the delicate balance that depends on the rainforest's millions of life forms for its own existence. Many indigenous peoples survive directly off of the resources found in the rainforests. When these resources are destroyed, the people lose their homes, their food, and their culture, which forces them to crowd into protected, endangered areas of forest for shelter and food, leading to further destruction and extinction. Whole cultures disappear along with the environment, and with them pass massive bodies of knowledge known only through oral traditions held by the shamans. 6 to 9 million indigenous people inhabited the Brazilian rainforest in 1500. In 1992, less than 200,000 remained. Scientists estimate an average of 137 species are driven into extinction every day. Within the next hour, approximately 6 species will become extinct. The alarming rate of extinction today, comparable only to the extinction of the dinosaurs, is specifically human-induced and unprecedented. One example I've witnessed are the Shipibo Indians of the Peruvian Amazon, who say that their culture is disappearing. Their younger people have taken it upon themselves to preserve it through dance and music to keep the memory of it alive. Another preservation of the Shipibo tradition are the intricate visionary patterns on the men's outfits, which are hand-drawn with ink, and the women's dresses, which are embroidered. These designs are inspired by the religious use of a plant group called ayahuasca, a medicine whose beginnings date back to pre-Inca times. The Guarani, who I have written about in my novel Land Without Evil, were the first indigenous people encountered by the Europeans nearly 500 years ago. With their domestication, encroachment, and catechization came their transformation into slave labor. Of the 23,000 living in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul today, nearly 9,000 have been expelled from their traditional land and are living in conditions of misery along the sides of the highways. For those who have gotten their land back, the soil is arid and unproductive, imposing a miserable life. They cannot hunt, the rivers are drying, and the land does not produce as before. To this day, the Guarani still migrate, searching for the land with no maladies, a paradise otherwise known as the land without evil, which is both the title and the story told in my novel. I'd like to read one of the scenes from Land Without Evil that shows the result of the upset of nature's balance. In this passage, the main character, Avatape, has just saved his family from an attack at the mission by prowling jaguars. In Guarani, houses are called malokas, and the word tekoake means the base passions and evil appetites of humans, imperfections for the animal soul. Avatape has just sat up all night watching over his family. The jaguars didn't run in packs when the people lived by themselves in the village, not until the white men brought cattle. His father and Avakaninde both said that bringing animals far into the forest had upset the balance and angered the gods. The jaguars ran together to hunt and eat the cattle to restore the lost balance. Cows had no place in the forest. Without protection of the mission, they wouldn't live. He remembered sneaking down to the corral with Avakarai that day he'd first heard of the strange animals. When the boys climbed the fence, the cows all stood and stared. Both boys jumped back behind the fence, uneasy with so many eyes scrutinizing them. "Do you not think they are living tekoake?" Avakarai said. "They have sleepy eyes. Look how slow they are. They do nothing but chew. They are always hungry." "Always hungry and they do not hunt," Avatape added. Avakarai giggled. "Sounds like Avatakwa." Avatape shared the laughter, then Avakarai grew serious again, nodding toward the cows. "My father says they walk straight to their death when they are slaughtered. They are too stupid to run. No forest animal would go to its death so easily. Its meat is soft and flabby like Father Rodrigo's stomach," Avatape said, laughing at his own joke. Avakarai chuckled, then his face grew solemn. "My father said that eating their meat will make our people soft, flabby, and stupid until they walk around with sleepy eyes like the cows. We will all walk straight to our deaths, slaughtered by the white men." Avatape shook off a chill at the memory of Avakarai's words. The people had grown slower and fatter living at the mission, and like the cows, most were always hungry, but didn't hunt. How many had gone to their deaths since the white men had come? He peered deeper into the blackness and thought he saw the beginnings of a gray haze forming above the darkness outside. He glanced over at what remained of the wood next to the hearth, nearly gone. How much time had passed since the attacks? He put more wood on the fire and kept his gaze steady as gray turned to silver, then indigo and crimson, finally blossoming into the first glimmer of the coming day. Blackness turned into shadow and formlessness into substance. When the first cries of morning birds filled the air, Avatape rose and stretched. His eyes burned and his limbs felt heavy. Tonight sleep would come quickly, but he had a long day ahead. He crossed the small room and stood in the doorway, looking out onto the muddy street. How many had died in the night? Careful not to wake his mother and sister, he put a pot of maize mash on the fire and gathered his family's cooking pots, pottery, and gourds, piling them on top of carrying nets. When his mother awoke, he had a gourd full of mash, then went to the forest to find 2 large cedar limbs so he could drag his family's belongings to his father's maloka. When he returned, Pinde and Kuna Waiwe Vera had most of their things packed into the chest. The rest they rolled into their sleeping skins. Avatape lashed the limbs and netting together. By the time they set out for his father's maloka, the sun had climbed above the surrounding buildings, and the mud in the street had begun to dry. Avatape led them past rows of quiet, darkened houses, wondering which had been visited by death and which had escaped. He pictured frightened families cowering by their fires. His stomach tightened at the remembrance of last night's screams and the sounds that followed, tearing flesh. Part of him wanted to investigate, possibly help. Part of him dreaded what he'd find. His first duty was to get his family away from the dangers of the mission to the safety of his father's maloka. With the help of his mother and sister, Avatape dragged everything they owned through the drying mud of the mission streets. The hot sun beat down on them until they reached the forest. The shade and wet leaves on the path let the load slide more easily, but now they had to contend with low-hanging vines and branches. Pinde stayed close by his side while his mother pushed from behind. No one spoke. Even Pinde, who usually chattered more than the squirrel monkeys and macaws combined, remained quiet. Mist rose in wisps from the ground, floating toward the sky like spirits. Birds cried and monkeys chittered. Avatape kept his senses alert. If predators threatened, any changes in the sounds of the forest would warn him. He felt safer among the trees than at the mission. The farther they journeyed from it, the more he felt the threat diminish. Even though he feared all the gods, he didn't think he had offended any, yet he felt caught in an inexplicable struggle. Should he believe in a Christian God, the myths of his people, or both? To survive, Avatopic thought only one question needed an answer. Which did he fear most?